Okay, let's get into it. The number one transfer on the market, former Michigan All-American Hunter Dickinson, is no longer available. The 7'1" center has committed to the Kansas Jayhawks. Made a little video and everything. Once again, Bill Self has a national championship contender on paper dead leg. How good are the Kansas Jayhawks now?
Oh, so he really was. You said something there off the top. He is a former All-American. He was a consensus second-team All-American in 2021. How about that as a freshman? Okay. It's a good get. Thoughts on his commitment video? Thoughts on big build, big build up. Big build up for a big announcement.
It's not, hey, you know what? It's maybe it's something I would have done when I was young. I did a lot of dumb things when I was young. It's not, I could have done without it, but you know, but if he enjoyed it, I'm happy for him.
More power to him. If you haven't seen it, he's shooting hoops. Unknown voice on the other end. Hey, Hunter, everyone's waiting on you. And then suddenly he's in the same place as Bill. Is he in Lawrence, Kansas right now? That's what I'm kind of confused on.
And then at some point he says, this is the hardest thing I've ever gone through. It's also the easiest.
Okay. In a way, and we will get to the on paper. I will answer Parrish's question, but because of Dickinson, you know, co-hosting a podcast with Barstool Sports and trash talking opponents and then getting roasted by those same opponents and just being willing to basically put himself out there in many ways, he is stepping into the role to, I guess, to be the biggest villain in college basketball for next season, which is probably a good thing for the sport. I said on HQ earlier on Thursday, I do think he is among the 5 biggest names in the sport. And now he goes to arguably the best coach in the sport at a blue blood program that recently won a national championship. There's a lot of good here for the visibility, and buzz factor in college basketball in general. We're talking about a roster move in the middle of May that is, certainly spiking a little bit of interest across the sport. And otherwise would not have been the case, obviously, a half decade ago. We're now a few years into this portal era, but Dickinson was the number one name. It does make Kansas a national championship contender. I don't think I would go so far as to put Kansas at number one right now. We can get into the roster. I guess we can get into the roster before we get into actually Dickinson and his stats and how he fits. But big picture, Dickinson going, he'll start as a center. They'll have KJ Adams back, who I think has immense potential to be among, I don't even know if he would qualify as a breakout player. He might, how about this? I think KJ Adams could have among the biggest lifts in productivity and that we'll see in the sport next season. Now, maybe Dickinson coming will.
That's what I said. You're not going to have a big jump in productivity playing next to Hunter Dickinson.
I still think he's got a chance. I know. I even with Dick, I think it'll maybe stymie it, but I'm in on Adams' upside. I am in a major way. They have maybe the best pass first point guard in the sport in DeJuan Harris. Now, there are 2 other transfers here. Nick Timberlake, who's coming from Towson, a career 38% three-point shooter, but he'll go up in competition. So can he be a 35% three-point shooter for Kansas? And he'll either start or be the first or second guy off the bench. And then Arterio Morris, who's a bit wait and see. He obviously had a controversial go of it at Texas and was just a bit player, but now he stays in the league. He goes to Kansas. And then they have freshmen coming off the bench, Chris Johnson, Marcus Adams Jr., and then Elmarco Jackson, who I think will be an All-American by the time he's a junior in college if he winds up staying that long. Could be as a sophomore. I think he will break into the starting lineup eventually. So there's plenty there. We'll wait and see on how deep the bench is overall, and then we are wait and see. This Kansas story might not even be done. There's a lot of stuff happening with this Parrish. We're wait and see on another freshman to be top 10 prospect in this class 2023, Mackenzie Mbako, who was a Duke commit. He has decommitted. There's some smoke around the idea that he might go to Kansas. I don't know if the Dickinson commitment affects that or not. I don't know, but if he does, it certainly bolsters Kansas's credentials to be the number one team. We'll wait and see on that. And then Oh, by the way, I don't know how much this will impact or not the prospectus of this program, but Kansas is still waiting for. It's still waiting for, and this will come in the next few months here. It's judgment in its IARP case dating back to the FBI investigation. Now, Self did sit games last season. We'll see how long, if any, there's a suspension there. We'll see if there's any kind of postseason ban there that people are now believing that won't happen because it hasn't happened with other schools. So that might not even be a factor at all, but there's still there's more to be told about the offseason story of Kansas basketball. It's a big day, huge day for Jayhawks fans. I would stop short of putting this team number one overall. Have you decided, as we get this podcast rolling here, let me hand the ball back over to you. Have you decided what you're going to do with this team yet?
I have not. The commitment comes like maybe 10 minutes before I'm starting my other show. Yeah. And I literally came straight from FedEx Forum to here. As I texted our boss, Marcus Nelson, and said, I'm coming home, podcasting, and then I will update the top 25 and one. I don't know, but I'll take a serious look at them at number one because man, on paper, it looks good. And when you add to it, that's the other thing. It's Bill Self's go. It's what the roster says on paper plus Bill Self.
Right.
Okay, so some of Bill's best teams have been 2-point guard teams, right? Now he's going to have that with DeJuan Harris and Marco Jackson. You get Nick Timberlake, I'm assuming, starting next to them. 6'4" guard, shot 41.6% from three on 6.7 attempts per game this past season at Towson. The big question is, okay, does it translate to the Big 12? Does it translate to the high major level? We'll see. But on paper, you're adding a quality shooter in Nick Timberlake. And then a KJ Adams, Hunter Dickinson front court. You got a former McDonald's All-American level guy in Arterio Morris coming off the bench. And like you noted, they could add Mackenzie Mbako. I think if they add Mackenzie Mbako, then let's go.
I know. I think
we're talking.
Yeah, we're cooking with gas. If that happens, yeah, I'm with you. Yeah.
How about this? About the safest team you could put at number one is Kansas, because they're not going to bomb. They're not going to fall. Yeah. Like they're never not good. Literally never not good. So if you're looking for what contender for preseason number one is least likely to make me look silly, the answer is Kansas, because they're the most reliable program in America.
Keep talking. I'm going to look up something. You're right about they're never not good. I just want to check something. So keep rolling.
Yeah. So I think the roster as constructed today is worthy of consideration. If you were to add Mackenzie Mbako, I'm probably ready to go there all the way to the top. Oh, should be noted, Kevin McCullough can still come back and hasn't said that he isn't. Now, most people seem to be operating under the assumption he's going to remain in the NBA draft. He is a projected second-round pick, but he does have a year of eligibility, and he has, to this moment, my understanding, maintained his college eligibility. So I don't think the numbers work at some point, but if you could bring back McCullough and add Mbako, now it's easy. They got to be preseason number one, but I don't think that's a likely scenario.
Before we get to – I can't find yours, so I'm going to have to go off the AP, my man. The most disappointing Kansas team, before we get to like Dickinson and his stats and his fit overall, I do want to just reference back to what you just mentioned there, because it is interesting. And I do think, especially if they get Mbako, there's a strong case. So there's really only been, and there's been some March letdowns, don't get me wrong. Kansas fans, I'm all too familiar with the fact that you've had plenty of teams seated very highly, not even make the second weekend before.
They got Farouk Manesh one year.
They got Farouk Manesh, number one overall seed. I think when that happened, they were the first number one overall seed to fail to make the Sweet 16, if memory serves correct, when they got Farouk Manesh back in that was 2010, I think. Anyway, so in 2021, they just get sideswiped in the second round by USC. They get blitzed, and one of the worst losses of Self's career. They lose 85-51. That Kansas team was a 3 seed. That Kansas team finished 27th at KenPom. That Kansas team did not win the Big 12. In fact, it finished behind Baylor. That was COVID year, uneven, but it was 5 losses behind Baylor in the standings. Going into that season, Kansas didn't receive any first place votes. It was 6 in the AP poll. So I'll say, we could, if I really could, dive deep on this GP, I would say you probably had Kansas anywhere from 3 to 8 preseason. So that's the only example. And it is a recent example, but it's the only real example of a Kansas team not living up to preseason expectations in a reasonable way. They were at 20 for Kansas to finish 27th at KenPom is the definition of an anomaly. I mean, I'll read you right now in the Bill Self era, starting most recently. Here we go. Ready? 9-3, 27-1, 17, 9-6-3, 12, 7-8, 4-3, 2, 14, 1, 5, 8, 11, 18. All right. It's outrageous consistency. If you follow college basketball, you are extremely aware of how outrageously impressive Bill Self's run has been at Kansas. So you are much safer betting with him if we're going to put him preseason 1, 2, 3, or whatever, they should, when everything settles, barring, catastrophic injury stuff or any outside factors that we aren't accounting for here, like Kansas should finish as a top 10 team next season. That's if things don't even go all the way right? So I think it has to be top 5. And I think your assessment is reasonable there. Remind listeners and viewers right now, if they have lost track, though, where do you have Kansas before you make this adjustment? So where are they in your rankings? And who do you have number 1 as we have curled into the first week of May?
Right now, I have UConn number 1. That is based on Andre Jackson coming back. If he doesn't, I'll move them. But right now, I'm projecting him back. I've got Purdue at 2. Marquette at 3, Duke at 4, Florida Atlantic at 5, Alabama at 6. I've already got Kansas at 7 before they add Hunter Dickinson.
Mm-hmm.
And that projection, I believe, is also from when did they officially add Nick Timberlake? When did he commit?
I want to say that was a couple of weeks ago. I think.
Well, then it might have taken
recent?
that into account then. But I've got Kansas at 7 already. So I'll have them in the top 5, and I will seriously consider them for number 1. You're not going to look stupid putting Kansas number 1. People might call you stupid when you do it today, but you're not going to look stupid putting Kansas at 1. They're always good.
It's viable, without a doubt. Okay, so that's the starting lineup. Dickinson, here's Dickinson's numbers real quick on this, because I just want to briefly debate where he stands in just the overall landscape of all this. So he averaged 18.5 points, 9 boards, shot 56% from the field, 41% from 3, 73% from the line, averaged, close to a shot and a half from beyond the arc. We'll see if that number ticks up next year. He has 2 years of eligibility left. He was a first-team All-League selection by Big Ten Media. He was second team in the eyes of the coaches last season. He's played 94 games in his career, and his career numbers overall are 17 points, 8.4 rebounds, a block and a half a game, and a 57% shooter. So the numbers are certainly there. I don't necessarily disagree with him being ranked number 1 in the portal. That's a near unanimous position from people that do this. Both 247 Sports, our own David Cobb, and others around the sport have identified him, and I think that makes a lot of sense. What I'll be interested to see is do we think that Dickinson will actually be the most productive transfer? I don't know if that will necessarily be the case. There have been some bigs who have succeeded under Self, and we'll wait and see if that is the case. I did pull the past 2 years of top 10 transfers heading into a season. So last year, this is Cobb's list. He had Kendrick Davis, who was tremendous, and he was certainly among the 3 best transfers in the entire country. And then he had Nigel Pack, Tyrese Hunter, Isaiah Mosley, Kevin McCullough, Terrence Shannon Jr., Janai Broom, Brandon Murray, KJ Williams, and Malachi Smith. Now, those were not the 10 best transfers last season. Kendrick Davis was the only player in that group that actually we introduced our all transfer team for the first time most recently, and I think the plan is to do that annually going forward. So we'll just wait and see. Now, the year before, I pulled from our buddy Jeff Borzello. In 2021, he He had Marcus Carr, who was not the best transfer that season. Remy Martin, no. Walker Kessler turned himself into a nice draft pick. He was right there. Timmy Allen, all Texas guys. Trey Mitchell, like, this is outrageous. Adam Miller, Garrison Brooks, Oscar Shibwe, who went on to win National Player of the Year, was 8th on that list. Kevin O'Banner and Dawson Garcia. I bring up these past 2 years and those top 10 players heading in from two different very, very good writers covering the sport, just to say, keep it in mind that Hunter Dickinson could wind up being the 3rd best, the 7th best, the 10th best transfer in the country next season. He does not need to be number 1. He's ranked number 1, and with good reason. He doesn't need to be number 1. He might not be number 1. And for Kansas to be at its best, maybe it's best if he isn't the most productive guy, because I think for Adams to thrive, and especially if you get Mbako, but Elmarco Jackson, the balance of all that, keep that in mind. Dickinson's been good. He can certainly get better. I'll be interested to see how his game grows. And if he truly does benefit from a change of scenery, there's obviously the potential that even if you go to a great program and go and play for a great coach, like, there's no guarantee that Hunter Dickinson is a top 15 player in the country next season. I think he'll be ranked in our top 15 players when we do that list in the preseason, GP. But I'm interested to see how this big change for him affects his game one way or the other, or maybe he just remains flat overall. I find it to be a very intriguing move.
Respectfully, I am not a subscriber to the Hunter Dickinson podcast. So if he said it, I don't know. I asked this from an honest place. Has he explained in any detail why he left Michigan?
We have not, as far as I can tell, GP, and trust me, I have not been absolutely in lockstep with everything Hunter Dickinson related, although it has been provided like NBA light melodrama over the past, week or so as we waited for this. I don't think so. He did put out late on Wednesday night, a classic graphic. I've enjoyed my time here. Thank you so much. I'll always.
No, that was the classic. I'm sorry that happened to you, or whatever. What's the meme? Like, I'm not reading all that.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I saw the graphic and I said,
"I'm sorry that happened for you," or "I'm happy though." Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I saw the graphic and I was like, "Yeah, I don't need to know. I don't need to know."
We already knew it was that. I actually did read through the whole thing just in case. I mean, it was his back was turned. And so anytime you get a player that his back is turned on the graphic, he's out of there. So I knew he was done, but I was like, let me read this just in case. And so we haven't gotten the full story. It is, be interesting to see if he does really disclose why. Because, he's leaving a place where, Juwan Howard, for not only was he a great big man and a great big man at that school, but he rightfully developed a reputation as a really good coach and a coach of big men. And Hunter Dickinson has decided that it is better for his personal journey to go somewhere else. Now he's going to Kansas, and I think that it could have some success there, but I don't have the details on that. And I don't, I understand why I picked Kansas. I'm of the belief that had Maryland been in the ACC, I almost think he would have gone back home. I think he didn't go to Maryland in part because he didn't want to have to face Michigan, which I understand. It's completely reasonable.
You think he's a chicken? You think he's a chicken?
I'm not saying that, but
are you a chicken?
But I do think it had a major factor. I think that was a major reason for that. I said that I thought he was going to go to Maryland. In fact, if you want, listen, this is really the only time it's going to happen. But if you want to listen to more of me and GP, we did get the band back together and did appear on a podcast together Wednesday. You will never hear Gary Parrish more buttoned up and less talkative ever on a podcast than on the Field of 68 episode we did on Wednesday, which was a coaching carousel recap. You will enjoy it. You will enjoy it in large part because I drop all sorts of references to this podcast, and Jeff Goodman had no idea what was happening. So go and find it if you have not listened already. We did have some of our listeners infiltrate their live chat, and we appreciate you very much. I thought it was going to be Maryland, but I guess I underestimated Dickinson. Really, I think that was a major factor here. And Kansas does make sense. Don't get me wrong. How these schools are each impacted. Like, I know Nova was really hoping that they could get him. Kentucky not getting him. Now there's some buzz like, will Shibwe return? Is that the best thing for Kentucky if Shibwe returns? I would say obviously it is, but they got a whole new roster coming in. It's super, super intriguing. That's for sure.
I was just interested in, like, if he had ever explained in detail why he decided he didn't want to finish his career at Michigan, because I don't want to overstate it, but he was on track to maybe be like a retired number, jersey hanging in the rafters type guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that you go back to Ann Arbor for the rest of your life for football weekends and people treat you like a god. Mm-hmm. And you give that up. You forfeit that when you do something like this. He had a really nice and productive career there. He helped Michigan make the Elite Eight as a freshman, the Sweet 16 as a sophomore. And then last season, they went to the NIT, which was kind of wild. Michigan had 2 projected first-round NBA draft picks, Kobe Buffkin, Jett Howard, and Hunter Dickinson. 2 projected first-round draft picks and Kobe Hunter Dickinson.
Buffkin jumping into the first round. We'll get to that more in the draft. No, you're not wrong, though. But, like, it's, yeah. Keep going.
Yeah, but they finished 18-16 overall, 11-9 in the Big Ten, lost to Vanderbilt second round of the NIT. So this was just interesting. I was diving into the numbers a little bit. Maybe this is why I left. As a sophomore, when Hunter Dickinson was on the court, he took 28.7% of Michigan's shots. Obviously led the team. As a junior, that number went down. Slightly, but down. In part because Jett Howard took 25.1% of Michigan shots while he was on the court. In Hunter Dickinson's sophomore year, nobody else on the team took more than 19.9% of Michigan shots while on the court. In his junior year, Jett Howard, 25.1, Buffkin was at 21.7. So Dickinson had his role as a scorer, as an option as a scorer, decreased just a little bit. Minutes per game went up, shots per game went down. All-Americans are sometimes bothered by such developments. So just take that for whatever it's worth. It's something I just noticed in the numbers. Your shots go down because the coach's son's shots are way, way up there, almost even with you.
I think that might – obviously some of these things have to play a factor, right? And I think that being part of it is something. Now Jett Howard is now off to the NBA, as first reported and projected on this podcast, by the way. Never forget that. But here we are, man. It'd be interesting to see track these teams. Like, I never thought Georgetown – there was never really any momentum around Georgetown. But Villanova, Maryland, Kentucky, the schools that lost out on this race to get Dickinson, we'll see. Like, Kansas wins right now, and Kansas wins almost always. But check in mid-January and just see where these schools are and how they're doing, having run their own races and lost it. I mean, this is a high-profile portal guy. You know, we only get like really a couple of these a year that really even separate themselves from the rest of the pack. And now Dickinson at Kansas is going to be among the most prominent storylines, obviously, heading into the season.
All right. So when we get done with this, I will dive into the top 25 and 1. So if you are curious to know where I will put the Jayhawks, give me about 90 minutes.